Good morning, everyone. I'm Les Kerr. I'm the host for this session, and I think you all will really enjoy it. It is my pleasure always to be associated with the Southern Festival of Books, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all this morning. I'll tell you about our poets, our authors in just a few minutes. First, let me welcome everyone on behalf of Humanities Tennessee. We'd like to thank our key sponsors, Metro Nashville Arts Commission, Ingram Content Group, Tennessee Arts Commission, Vanderbilt University, and Parnassus Books. The festival is a free, nonprofit event that is also supported in part by donations from individuals. If you appreciate the event and want to support it, you can do so in the app or by visiting our website at www.humtn.org. And then if you are watching on Facebook Live or YouTube and you want to ask questions during the session, feel free to do so. A staff person will move those questions to the proper place. So we would like for you to participate if you'd like. Also, Parnassus Books is our bookseller, and your purchases of the books you learn about via Parnassus help keep the festival free. Humanities Tennessee staff will place the book buy links for that session at the top of the chat. Parnassus Books of Nashville remains our bookseller. Now let me introduce our authors. I'll tell you a little bit about them, but just for the top here, Anna B. Sutton, Jesse Graves, and Clay Matthews will join us this morning. And I'll tell you a little bit about each one of them. Jesse Graves is the author of the poetry collections Tennessee Landscape with Blighted Pine, Basin Ghosts, Spectre Mountain, also Said Songs and Merciful Days. His work received the James Sill Award for writing about the Appalachian South from the Fellowship of Southern Writers and 2 Weatherford Awards from Berea College. Jesse teaches at East Tennessee State University, where he is poet in residence and professor of English. Clay Matthews has published poetry in journals such as the American Poetry Review, Blackbird, Kenyon Review, the Southern Review, and elsewhere. His books are Superfecta, published by Ghost Road Press, Runoff, Pretty, Rooster, and Shore, and he currently lives in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and teaches at Elizabethtown Community and Technical College. Anna B. Sutton's work has appeared in Indiana Review, Third Coast, Coppernickel, Booth, Los Angeles Review, and other journals. She received her MFA from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington and is a James Merrill Fellowship from Vermont Studio Center. She is co-founder of the Porch Writers Collective and has worked for numerous literary organizations, including Humanities Tennessee, Lookout Books, Blair Publisher, Gigantic Sequins, One Pause Poetry, Dialogist, and Ecotone. She currently works at UNC School of the Arts and is pursuing her MED in Clinical Mental Health Counseling at North Carolina State University. Thank you all for being here, and we are going to open the program by asking each of our poets to read, and we'll go alphabetically and start with Jesse Graves. Morning, Jesse.
Good morning, Les. Thank you for hosting us today, and thanks to Clay and Anna for sharing their work with us, and all the folks at Humanities Tennessee for missing my friends in Nashville this weekend. But I appreciate looking out for everybody's safety and making sure everybody can still enjoy the festival without any unnecessary exposure. So Les mentioned a couple different books of mine that have come out recently, two books in one pandemic. I don't know if that's a great strategy, but I thought I would read, I've got a book of essays that just came out this month, and I thought I'd read just 2 paragraphs from an essay that will kind of set up a poem or two that I will read after, kind kind of introduce Appalachia to this conversation as well, which I know is one of our many themes to talk about. So I want to read this from my friend Marianne Worthington, who's reading her poetry later this afternoon. I hope you can all come back in for that. Marianne invited me to write a short piece for a magazine that she edits called Still the Journal. It's one of the best Appalachian literary resources out there. And just sort of an open topic, write about something you haven't written about that you're interested in. So I chose James Agee's poetic prologue essay, whatever, unnameable piece, Knoxville, Summer 1915. And I just want to read 2 paragraphs from an essay about that. It's called First Encounter, James Agee's Knoxville, Summer 1915. Childhood is full of secrets, mysteries, and disguises. I grew up in a remote, essentially eerie place way out in the country with no neighbors or lights from other houses in sight. The evenings were quiet, and my mother and I often sat on the front porch and listened for bob whites and whippoorwills in the summer. If my father was home for work, he would join us, or my Uncle Gerald, or my brother or sister, both half a generation older than me, and soon with children of their own. There was so much I did not understand about the adults in my family, about the fears I experienced when I was too far in the woods by myself, about noises and shadows and changes in the atmosphere. I sensed that I was surrounded by mysteries of every kind. I had all this uncertainty, even though I lived with kind and loving people, a family that cared for me and gave me little reason for worry. The first time I read James Agee's brief poem essay, Knoxville, Summer 1915, I felt I'd seen through a window back into my own boyhood. The essay opens with an unforgettable in medias res sentence. We are talking now of summer evenings in Knoxville, Tennessee, and the time I lived there so successfully disguised to myself as a child. That description caught me with such force, such immediacy, that it might as well have picked up in the middle of my own life. The house I was raised in and where my mother still lives today was built in 1915. That house was less than 40 miles from Knoxville, Tennessee, in the tiny Union County community of Sharps Chapel. Not only did Agee's place hold a deep personal resonance for me, but so did the date of his essay. I first read Knoxville Summer 1915 as a first-year college student at Lincoln Memorial University, when my English professor, David Worley, advised me to read the writers who came from my part of the world. He mentioned Agee in particular, along with Thomas Wolfe and Wilma Dykeman. I knew a good deal of my own family history and a bit of the history of East Tennessee, but I did not know much about the rich literary background of Appalachia. I did not realize at the time that I was in the perfect setting to learn about it, the academic home place of George Scarborough, Jesse Stewart, James Still, and Don West. When I read Agee, I could not believe that something so beautiful had been written about my part of the world, about a place I knew so well and the people who lived there. So that essay goes on just a little bit longer, and I've got a couple of other more academic type essays about James Agee's work, particularly his nonfiction, kind of sprawling creative nonfiction piece, Let Us Now Praise Famous Men. And also have an essay in this collection about one of my old dear friends and mentors, Jeff Daniel Marion, who passed this summer, a real loss to East Tennessee writers and to Appalachian literature and literary community. Well, I think that piece by Agee is sort of a foreshadow of so much of what I would end up writing about in my sort of adult writing life. And so I'll read one poem from Merciful Days, my poetry collection that came out at the end of last year, October of 2020. And I'll start with a poem that kind of picks up a theme from Agee. It's called Raft. Life there seemed never to change. except around the edges of the yard where leaves sprouted, turned colors, fell carelessly away, and started over. Then my grandfather died, who drove his shaky truck around selling orchard trees. Then my Uncle Cotton died, who taught me lonely old songs on his homemade guitar. I watched my parents carry the sodden weight of their sadness for a time, finally returning to their regular lives without a father, without a favorite uncle. And then I was different, sitting alone on the raft of being 12 years old, wanting something but not knowing what, floating away from the unchanging life. Tiny metal cars left in boxes, plastic soldiers untouched for weeks, then for months, childhood becoming a song I had forgotten the words to, a tune I could no longer carry. And then I'll just read one more poem. A lot of omens and portents and just straight up ghosts in this book. I don't know. This is a sort of a book of elegies in some ways for my dad and my brother, and just childhood in a place that's changing fast. And so I'll read one poem that sort of takes us back in time a little bit, called East Running Spring. Some looked into the water and saw nothing, or more rightly said, looked through the water into the mirror at the flame of the candle, and still saw nothing they would admit. My mother would never peek, she claims, but her own mother did, who showed her and me where to find the secret spring among the several that burbled up from the muck of what the first settlers called Bearwaller and Caney Creek. You had to know how to dip beneath a slate rock just under the road bank, where the grass parted for a stream of pebbles and silt, for a cold, clear jet running just the opposite direction of the main creek it fed into. My grandmother gazed with all her brothers and sisters. What I see is a casket, the oldest boy, Rubel, said, but I can't tell who's in it. He was dead in a month, 19 years old. Their sister Delta, what she saw was the face of a stranger, and she was married within a year. Her new husband, the picture image of the man she described that night, candles burning on the table like the new moon of March. Another sister, Minnie, saw a blackbird circling, and Clyde made out the curved handle of a cane. Others claimed to see only a blur, or a swirl like the wind, or the force that makes water flow. All right. Thank you all. I can't wait to hear from Clay and Anna.
Thank you very much, Jesse. That was wonderful. Clay will be next, and his book is Four-Way Lug Wrench. It's a part highway manifesto and part elegy for 1,000 things lost on the road of life. Welcome, Clay.
Thanks, Les, and thanks, Jesse and Anna and Humanities Tennessee. Thank you all for being here out there in the world today, and joining us for some poetry on a Saturday morning. This book is a sort of a highway book, and it's the fall right now. The leaves are turning, and this first poem is called The Turning, so I thought I would start there. The Turning. October and peppermint schnapps, the sound of baseball on the radio. Sometimes the silence stops everything for a moment. Cat calls and leaves rustling, the hum of tires down the road's curve, an old Buick turning over, and goddamn it all to hell, heard from a window. One year you stopped listening to classic rock altogether. The next year an old song became holy again because you remembered pain and dreams. 22 and a ridiculous guitar solo, so right for being so long. I drive a back road and think of Williams's young housewife and the difference between perversity and beauty. The leaves break perfectly like so many other dying things. It's a long time now you've spent not listening. Go on and let it all break your heart again. So that poem was a little bit of a response to a William Carlos Williams poem that I love in a lot of ways, but I also never know how to feel about exactly. The Young Housewife, if you're familiar with it. The next poem I want to read, Jesse mentioned an elegy, so I'll read an elegy also. This one does have some adult language in it, so if you need to put your earmuffs on at some point, just to kind of, there was really no way around it, I think, for this poem. I used to work with a guy when I was in high school, and even before that, Nicky Tackett, and this poem sort of, I wrote it before I knew he had passed away, but I sort of knew he was one of those that was going to be leaving us early in one way or another. And so this one is called Hit or Miss Elegy. There are 1,000 terrible names one person can call another, and I have said them all. All my memories began a little bit confused, but I was 18 and standing on rotten carpet. There were short sleeve shirts on a chair. My brother and I in a trailer parked at the edge of a cotton field. Nicky and Kenny, 2 guys we worked with, all of us for my dad, cutting some meth on a small table, asking if we still wanted to go frog digging. These are the people that other people say shouldn't have free health care. These are the people others say should just rot. Natural selection, rubbish to the wind, worthless pieces of shit, and on and on. The irony here is that they don't care about healthcare anyway. They don't care about government. They don't care about their teeth or livers. They don't care about much but right now. A paycheck is a long way away most of the time. A week is an eternity. I am friends with these people, but I am not them. I am half in love with their lives at 18 and the other half in love with their lives today. We all move around the trailer in different ways. Awkwardly with the drugs on the table and a gun resting in the corner. More familiar when it was another trailer that my sister lived in. 4th of July, baked beans in the oven, fireworks lining up in the dead grass outside. Redneck, poor white trash, say whatever you want. I'm confused about a lot of things. I don't blame you. Nicky and I used to work together, building utility trailers. We used to go out on Friday nights and drink at the Blue Moon. I was underage. He was just wanting to be perpetually young, wondering about how to get fired from another job so he could draw unemployment, so he could do nothing while collecting your hard-earned tax money. These are the kind of people I've called names too. Whether bum or prick, lazy bastard or junkie, we named each other in the daylight and dark hours before and after we would meet up for drinks. In my town, we all had names, and we were all known, too, by the names we'll never know, mouthed in the cabs of cars and to different sorts of friends, and while driving back to college or in line at the grocery store trying to buy cigarettes with food stamps. Everybody wants so much. Some of my neighbors today would love to be able to carry concealed pistols in bars. I would like student loan forgiveness. We're begging like dogs, little ideologies barking all over the place. And what is right or wrong? These are my friends. I look at us all and love us for what we are and are not. Fathers, sisters, addicts, assholes, etc., and so on. I'm 18 again. I'm 31 next month. I'm looking at the rain outside, waiting for the sun, and wondering if Nicky is dead yet. It's easy to miss him right now, being so far away. If he's alive, I'm sure he's still a worthless son of a bitch. But even a worthless son of a bitch deserves better. And that poem dates me a little bit. Remember the days of being 31. I'm going to read one more. This last one is towards the end of the book, and it is called Ampere. And I just want to thank you all again for being here today. Even kind of though we're doing this remotely, hopefully these words kind of carry across the screen in this case. Ampere. A power line goes down and burns a hole through the center of an oak. A generator hums. the frequency of power replacing power, a boat motor in the Mississippi calling out the carp to fly. Angels, she said at the end, they're here. Thousands balled up and dead in a backed up irrigation ditch. This is where we send stories to die. Empty pitchers of beer and a tumbler of whiskey and chicory coffee, shrimp shells rotting in a cardboard box, a turtle dove with her head pulled off, a throat full of Milo seed, and in the charcoal month we've burned the breasts and sang a song or two. Amen to the spark before it catches fire, the pistons of a three-wheeler bouncing across a fallowed field, and a boy with nothing better to lose gassing that two-stroke into the distance. What waits there? A question about pronouns I haven't quite been able to figure out, slow rain and a tree line filled with the voices of starlings settling down and turning on the cicada station. Late nights with a forklift and the arc coming off of a welder, fusing these pieces together for now. Thank you all.
Thank you, Clay. We appreciate that. Now we'll go to Anna B. Sutton, and let me just read just a little bit about her book, Savage Flower. It is the winner of the 2019 St. Lawrence Book Award. Anna B. Sutton explores female oppression and agency in the Bible Belt South. The intertwined landscapes of Tennessee and North Carolina are the backdrop for Sutton's beautiful warring marriage of religion, family, the body, sex and reproductive rights, and the inevitable cycle of destruction and rebirth. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for who's gone for me. It's wild to be reading at Southern Festival. I used to volunteer when I was a high school student to wear the big book mascot costumes for the children's tent. So my sister was like, I'm only going to watch your reading if you do it in the Clifford costume. But you know what? I couldn't secure one. Halloween is close. Those things are selling out. So here I am, Cliffordless. But I am going to read some poems from Savage Flower, which was published this July from Black Lawrence Press. And I feel everybody's pain. Jesse, I feel your pain. I only had one pandemic publication. I can't imagine two. But I'm just so grateful for opportunities like this to share, even when we can't be together in person. And I feel like it's appropriate to start with a poem called Nashville. Nashville. 1. A city of transplants. Wanderers with guitar cases strapped to their backs, blatant as blinking neon signs that line Lower Broad. Robert's boots, the smiling cascade of pigs. Singer-songwriters turn their palms up and we bang ours together, resigned, wind-up percussionists. Our roots burrow through limestone, branches long buried by kudzu. Nothing shines for us. 2. Pilgrims tap their empty glasses against the bar and we oblige, always smiling, always tucking the loose hairs back. Pressing the meat of our palms against our temples in the privacy of the kitchen, we accommodate each fantasy, whir like a jukebox with every dropped coin. A thin man sings about leaving and we wonder what we should have done to keep him. We let that man strip our rhinestones for something precious, and in return, all of us were made less brilliant. 3. Water is the hand of God and mud is your only constant. You offer us up each of your elements, neon flesh, the guttural thump of our heels against the floor of a honky-tonk, every calloused finger of your fatherless children. You make us an offering because you already know how we'll fade, biodegrade, disappear like fog on the banks once the sun creeps high enough to pierce it. 4. What's mine? The playhouse in the backyard, the aluminum slide that would sear my thighs every summer, the splinters, the rusted chain of the swing set, piles of concealed cat shit in the sandbox, wood and aluminum, the bones of something else. Waxy fragrance of magnolia and dirt ache in my chest when the first cloud broke, chordal hiss of tires across a dampened street. 5. On the news, I watch a man cling to a phone pole, bob like a lure, then sink. Water swallows my old street and fills the driveways. My home drinks deep of the cup, then pours itself out. They say to drown is a gift, and once you give in, there is peace. Imagine a body melted to current, carried across the mud, the tangles of kudzu, over this city, into the atmosphere, past any boundaries we ever built. Hurricane Marina, Center Hill Lake. Thousands of silver fish flash like melting ice along the wind-whipped peaks of the lake in April. I think pollution, see human error, but am told otherwise, that each year the lake turns like a body in bed and the shock is too much for the smaller fish. At night, the revel of my naked coworkers cannonballing from the patio. I swim away, between the foam columns that hold up the dock, under the lacework of steel. I am never as bold as in water, never as naked as when dragging my body up the boat ramp or stumbling drunk down the slick aluminum bridge, my whole world a clatter of after hours echoing across the lake. I want to pray, to believe that stars are just a scatter of light on my inner eyelid, that what is vast can be held between my fingers. The hills that encircle the lake are dark and silent as the sky. They only reply in echoes. So I appreciate Les sharing the description of my book, just because a lot of it is about my constant journey back and forth on 40 East between North Carolina and Tennessee. And so is the book. So is my life. So now we're going to move east to North Carolina. Hometown. What we called love, I call a dead jellyfish crusted in gray gold Atlantic sand. Something children toss at each other once the birds have carried off the poison. Long ribbons dripping with salt and venom. What was touch is the length of the Blue Ridge Mountains' tubercular spine. How a park bench in November was your hand, each unrelenting plank refusing to give. How my body looked elsewhere for softness, to the black dirt, the ryegrass, finally the ocean. Middle Tennessee reached for coastal Carolina in the bed of my truck. The tidal hush of feet in an empty house. I never understood ownership until I left you. Then everything was mine. The old mattress tucked into a back room, mine. Mine, the small collection of flatware, the rotting deck, the salt in my nostrils, mine. When I walked the shoreline searching for the jagged cut of a dorsal fin, I found one, a 6-foot shark circling the breakers. And then she too was mine. And I'll wrap this up with one more poem. Boy returns to water to wash sand from his feet. Flame, vein, fissure. The lightning strikes a nearby pier and electrifies the shore, shocks his body to still. And you wonder why I'm so afraid of living. When the sky opens up to remind us that no, the vast Atlantic is not impenetrable. It isn't just what cuts circles in the water around you that you should fear. When 3 commercial jets come down in a summer. You tell me it's safer than barreling down a highway, but the sky wants you to know it is not your heaven. It will rain on you however it can until you begin to understand. It will tell the ocean to rise towards the clouds and swallow your beach house. It has sacrificed your son. You should have painted blood on the jam. I opened my artery and sugar poured out. Lucky I'm childless, lucky cyst-riddled, lucky to know so well what's got my number. In the mountains, the trees bend like spinsters, boughs branching their fingers to the dirt. Lucky what struck here was sickness, slow and grounded in stone. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing your words with us. I'll open the discussion and also remind our viewers that if you have a question or a comment, please enter that, and then an administrator from the book festival will let us know about that. So we want to encourage all of the viewers to chime in and ask questions and make comments. For all of you, I would like to talk about the concept of Southern poetry. Do you grasp that? I mean, do you identify with that term? Do you think regionally when you are composing or getting ideas?
Everyone's very hesitant. I'll jump
Well,
in.
okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I do identify as a Southern poet. And if I think about it as an individual, it's because of my image systems, the things that I rely on to make connections to the larger world. And they're largely based in the Southern ecosystem, the Southeastern United States ecosystem. But at the same time, I hesitate to define Southern poetry because I think in the past, it has been dominated by a certain type of voice. And I think just like the South, there are a million different kinds of voices and kinds of experiences that exist in this region. So to have sort of hard and fast thematic rules, I think is a disservice to the diversity of the Southern voice, which is so exciting.
One of the things, Anna, since you are well familiar with Wilmington on the coast, as well as other parts of North Carolina and Tennessee, I grew up in Mississippi and I grew up on the Gulf Coast. I found that within that one state, there were so many different personalities from one end. And Tennessee is the same way between Memphis, Nashville, and East Tennessee. Does that play into any of your writing, Clay and Jesse? Do you have thoughts about this?
Go ahead, Clay.
Yeah, I think it definitely plays into mine, and I think kind of like Anna, at times I felt that kind of genre expectations can be a sort of like pigeonhole where we kind of they can be constraining, and I think I tried to. When I was younger, I wouldn't necessarily have identified as a Southern poet, but I think I would now just because where I've lived and my language and my experiences are defined by that. But thinking of I-40, I have a poem about I-42 and 500 miles of Tennessee. Having driven that span from Memphis to Bristol more than a few times, it is. I mean, it's pretty amazing the way that the landscape sort of changes. It's subtle in some ways, but the cultures from Memphis to Bristol, they're different places, with lots of kind of just like people are the same, but people are different too. And I think having lived kind of close to both places, I grew up pretty close to Memphis, and then lived about 10 years in East Tennessee. I think just being on either side of Tennessee, I was really able to kind of appreciate those differences within a state.
One of the things you mentioned in the poem you read, one of the poems you read, was the issue that was the big issue here in Tennessee: guns and bars. Do you look at current events when you look for or subject matter, or do they just pop into your head?
Yeah, I think they just pop in. I probably tried to run away from them in some ways, but I think inevitably, I spend time reading news. I spend time looking out the window a lot too, and those two kind of things just kind of channel into whatever I'm writing about.
Jesse, I love the fact that the names you chose, Uncle Cotton and the sisters Delta and Minnie, are those real people?
Oh yeah, yeah, those are real people. So I'll kind of circle back and answer that by way of saying that I think of writing about, I wasn't really even aware of the term Appalachia all that much until I went to college and took an English class, and we talked about Appalachia. And I just we thought of ourselves as country people. We were just rural people. And so those are my images. Those are my experiences. So I don't think I've super consciously thought about being a Southern writer or an Appalachian writer. But for instance, the names of all my aunts and uncles, I mean, those might fit in anywhere, but they have a very southern, very Appalachian, East Tennessee ring to them, to me. So that is just an element of the material that I have to work with.
Hey,
Well,
Jesse, I did just want to interrupt and remind you that the video rules that we've developed during the pandemic is if your cat appears in the background, you have to let us see it.
there you go.
I was trying to figure out how to get her in there. Yeah,
If
there
we-
she is. Yeah, she figured it out.
And what's her name?
This is Little Britches.
Little Britches.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
that falls right into what I was saying about Uncle Cotton and Delta and many. You got Little Britches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Too bad we couldn't get that on the credits. We could have Little Britches there too.
She could have been a co-star.
I know that there are probably poets and authors, and since I'm a songwriter, and there are probably other songwriters watching. Talk about the writing process. I'll just let each of you talk about how you go about it once you have a subject in your mind or an idea for a poem. I'll start with Anna.
Yeah, actually, we were talking about this in the green room a little bit, and like, how do we come to poetry? And so, I can't remember who, but somebody made a joke about, don't all poets want to be songwriters first. And I think I grew up in a household that was very pro poetry, if that can be a political stance. But I know that a lot of what I was writing as a kid, I was in Nashville, I was surrounded by music. And so I wanted to write songs. And I think the way that serves me now as an adult is that while I didn't pursue a career in songwriting, I do have a real connection to language and its musicality. So I think the impact of the order of words and the selection of words from a whole bunch that all mean the same thing, all that kind of comes from those early days of trying to write songs and trying to fit within the sort of expected structure of songwriting, which was such a gift to get to experience, even if it didn't become the kind of writing I do now. But now that is sort of inherent, and like these image systems we're talking about, it's like part of my DNA. So my process now is really just finding the time to write, because I have a full-time job and am finishing up my clinical mental health counseling license, and I have a toddler now. And and it's a pandemic, not to forget that. So I think, for me, it's almost like finding the time, and then once I have that time, just completely immersing myself in the process. And whether it's inspired by an image or a newspaper headline or just a little bit of music that is playing in the back of my head, I think just kind of riding that wave and taking the opportunity when it's there, which may be similar for you as a songwriter, Les, as far as like when inspiration strikes, hopefully you've got time to sit down and write it.
There are so many napkins and torn off envelopes with ideas, and you all may do the same thing. Jesse, what about your writing process?
Well, I feel like it's I try to write a number of different things. I try to keep a few things going at once, because sometimes you might have 2 hours and you sit down and you think, oh, I've got 2 hours to work on a poem, which doesn't happen all that often, as you all know. And then you sit down and you're like, well, I've got 2 hours. What am I? So I try to keep this is how like you end up after many years of doing this with a book of essays that you didn't really, it wasn't really ever your main gig, but you realize you're writing other things, and you're writing, I sort of tell myself I'm writing fiction a lot of the time too. And I never really have published any, never really, probably not ever going to, but I try to keep different channels open. And for me, yeah, that's that whole songwriting, that whole musicality, sometimes just listening to music, or if I really do get stuck, I'll find a poetry book that I'm not way too familiar with, that maybe a new poet to me, or an older poet I haven't really read all that closely. And sometimes that for me is like that lights the candle.
Clay, is there a particular method you use to jumpstart your mind to get going?
Trying to pay attention for me, I think, of kind of the practice of observing, and kind of the same way. Like I often don't have a lot of time, so used to I would sit down and like bang a bunch of stuff out on a typewriter and go through that and mark stuff out and grab things, and I would still like to do that in a lot of ways, but now like my little notes feature on my iPhone, it's like if I get a line in there, and then I get a few of them. At some point, I think it kind of builds up, and I'm like, okay, I have enough sort of like disparate ideas here that there has to be some sort of thread between them, and I kind of have to find that. And I studied fiction a lot and wrote a lot of fiction when I was younger, and then it didn't serve the sort of the fragmentation in my mind, I don't think, and so I spend a lot of time now trying to put those fragments together in something that looks like a narrative to me that probably wouldn't necessarily to somebody else. And every once in a while I have one of those poems, that just like it writes itself from start to finish in my mind before I even sit down. And that's when I'm like, I gotta get to, a computer or something soon. But that's like a once every couple of years type of thing, but it's a pretty fun moment when that happens.
You mentioned the computer. Do you all write with computers, or do you do longhand? What do you like to do when you sit down to write?
I love a like Google Word doc, and I know that is not very artistic. I went to Appalachian Center for Craft for a couple of years, so like the hands-on craft of a thing was really drilled into my head. But honestly, I love writing on the computer because I can like live edit and move stuff around. I can cut and paste a line and say, would that be better here? So there's all this functionality that is available to us. And it's so exciting for me in the writing process to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I would agree. I try to do everything. Like I don't want to be the writer who has to have this certain scented candle and a certain cup of tea and it has to be 5 a.m. in the morning or whatever. I keep one of these. A friend just got me a little 3-pack of these little notebooks. Keep one in my pocket pretty much all the time. And you see my old typewriter on the desk back there. My daughter got me an old typewriter that I love to bang around on. But most everything, just because of the time crunch that we all experience, most everything gets typed out, first draft, second draft, however many drafts, right into a Word document, right on the laptop.
Clay, do you have a preferred method of getting it all down?
It's become the computer for me also. I mean, like, because it's so convenient, I can start a draft in my office when kind of have 20 minutes, and then I can grab it from home when I'm there to kind of look at it again. And so I still like to do some kind of other more kind of hands-on types of like drafting or even just kind of brainstorming or whatever else, but I don't do it nearly as much as I used to.
Well, we have about a minute left, and I want to thank all of you for being here. Clay Matthews, Jesse Graves, and Anna B. Sutton. Also to the viewers, we want to make sure that we let you know that the Southern Festival of Books continues until tomorrow. So this is not the end by any means. There's a lot more left today and tomorrow. So I also want to thank the Southern Festival of Books for the opportunity to host this great session. And I really have enjoyed reading your work, and I look forward to reading more of it. And I hope that we'll see you in person soon at the Southern Festival of Books. I see we have a comment. Jeff Harden says, Jesse, I know you're talking about me. So I don't know. That's between the two of you. But again, we want to thank all the sponsors of the Southern Festival of Books and invite the viewers, if you are interested in continuing to keep this wonderful program going, become a member, become active in the Humanities Tennessee. And we want to thank you all for being here this morning.
you.